Welcome to Crimson Clues, where shadows hide secrets and silence reveals the truth. Every story is a puzzle, and every clue takes you closer to the answer. Subscribe now, join the hunt, and let the mystery begin. Chapter 1. The Call at Myrtle Bank. Hercule Poirot first encountered a crime based on a telephone call in Jamaica, between the blue sweep of Kingston Harbor and the verdant slopes of the Highlands. We had planned to spend a pleasant week of sun, fruit, and leisure before taking a steamer to New York. The season had been busy. A case in Buenos Aires had taken more out of us than we had expected. The Motel Myrtle Bank offered rest. On the first evening, the air felt like warm silk. Palms maintained a steady silence. Lightning sewed white seams into a bank of cloud, which the locals referred to as brewing danger. "A storm is in it," muttered a porter, almost appreciatively. "Perhaps bad, maybe not." We met Mr. Arthur Willoughby in the lounge, which served as a reading room, chess club, and gathering place for the majority of the island's gossip. He was a thin man with the pale, neat appearance of a clerk, avoiding the sun and keeping orderly ledgers for comfort. He sold policies for Caribbean Mutual and moved in a straight line. His suit was black despite the heat. His hat's brim revealed a meticulous brush. "Only one game, Mr. Poirot," my companion said, bowing. "Hercule Poirot." Willoughby responded, "It would be my honor." "And yours," he gently said to me. "Hastings," I said, "but I'm content to observe. I don't pretend to understand chess. I admire it. One can admire ballet without performing a pirouette." Willoughby played the cautious, dependable game that a prudent man plays with his money. Poirot, whose tactics are precise and orderly, smiled when a little trap closed. Checkmate appeared with the air of a solved column from a newspaper. Willoughby expressed genuine satisfaction. "You must show me the line." Poirot replied, "You flatter me. If you had watched the peaceful square rather than the attack, you could have escaped twice." Willoughby laughed. "The story of my life," he said. "The threat always comes from the peaceful square." He paused. "I don't mean to be overly direct, but you are the gentleman they mentioned. What about the detective?" Poirot tilted his head. "I am not a client." Willoughby continued, detecting and correcting his own excitement. "Oh no, I sell life insurance, not death. But I read the newspapers. Could I offer you both a glass?" We agreed. He mentioned the tram that ran up to Halfway Tree, the cricket pitch at Sabina Park, and the moist sea breeze that causes locks to rust if oil is not used. He said, "My wife," twice in the calm tone of a husband who has been married long enough to talk from a place of inclusion. He asked no further questions concerning Poirot's work and immediately got my approval. We might have parted like this, but the phone rang behind the counter. The clerk called, "Mr. Willoughby, call for Mr. Willoughby." Willoughby rose and walked to the stand. The hotel maintained the instrument on a high table near the pillar, where everyone could hear a man insisting he had been rung up. He took the receiver. He listened like one might to a strange song. "Yes, speaking." "Who, please?" "Mr. Quayle. I beg your pardon." A pause. His expression changed slightly. Surprise, then attentiveness. "A meeting. This evening at 8, Garden Crescent, east of Constant Spring Road. I've never done business this late." "The weather." Another pause. He took notes on a blotter using a hotel pencil. "A large premium." "Yes, I can come." "You call yourself Mr. Quayle, right?" "Thank you." "Very good, thank you." He hung up thoughtfully. "Odd," he said as he returned to us. "This appears to be a referral. A gentleman wishes to assure his business partner of a substantial sum. He claims he got my name from Mr. Clark, a colleague. But Reuben Clark is in Port Antonio this week, so he would have notified me." He looked at his watch. 10 minutes to 7. It is every agent's goal to be sought after, not sought after. he continued, smiling with regret. However, this storm does not appear to be an appropriate companion for a tram journey. Poirot's eyes hadn't left his face. He mumbled, Garden Crescent East. I've walked many cities, my friend. Every city has its mischief in the naming of streets. Oh, that exists, said Willoughby. I believe I'll ask at the desk for a plan. My wife expects me home by 7 o'clock, but she understands. She's used to my calls. I'll go up now and call her to put her at ease. He left right away. When he returned, his hat brim was in place, his collar was up, and a light mackintosh was slung over his arm. Mrs. Willoughby at the house on Orange Street? I asked. Yes, he replied with a nod. We reside in one of the older homes near the tram line, and the shutters are especially useful in this weather. Poirot said, You go alone. Must, said Willoughby. It's my bread. He made a modest bow and left. The palms bent once, as if to taste his hat, and continued speaking. The first thick drops began to touch the veranda. Poirot said, Abian, after a little time. That was a voice behind a mask. Hastings, you've heard nothing. I gazed at mon ami. The expression of a careful man who repeats to himself the words of another man. And Garden Crescent East is the type of invention that strives for precision. Do you think it is a trick? Poirot believes that the peaceful square might occasionally mask danger. The rain began in earnest, and the palm fringes flew out like hair. Lightning stitched its white seam again, much closer. We were finishing a late supper when Willoughby came back, wet to the knees and pale. No Crescent East, he said before we could ask. There is a garden lane and a garden circle, but no Garden Crescent and nothing east. The men at Constant Spring looked at me as if I were crazy. The tram is crawling in this weather. I'm a fool. I've kept Julia waiting. He asked for his bill, refused coffee, and then left. It lacked a 4 through 9. The number of guests in the lounge has decreased. Only a tiny group from the chess club remained, defending their views, and 2 planters disparaged cane and ships. Poirot drained the cup. Let us take the air, he said. We made it as far as the veranda. Then a constable dashed across the hotel entrance, water dripping from his tunic. Anyone here know Mr. Arthur Willoughby? He inquired. We do, Pooh said quietly. Come quick, said the man. House on Orange Street. The neighbors say he's back but can't get in. His wife isn't answering. There's he paused and looked at us through the rain. There is talk. Poirot set his hat. We come, he replied simply. The rain pelted our faces like hurled rocks. When we boarded the tram, it screeched against the wet rails. It felt as if the entire island was leaning under the weight of the storm. I thought of Garden Crescent East, a voice, a false street, and a slight shiver that had nothing to do with the rain. Chapter 2. The Empty Errand. We found Orange Street in a dim theater, with rain-smeared lamps, shutters closed, doors barred, and the storm obscuring sound and shape. The tram conductor swore at a branch on the line before hauling it clear with a hook. We jumped down near the corner, our boots plunging into the rush of water headed for the bay. The Willoughby cottage seemed like any other, a nice wooden dwelling with a little fence. Hibiscus smashed flat by the wind. A tiny veranda, Jealousy's windows closed tightly. 2 neighbors in capes waited under the eaves. Mr. Ezra Delgado, a music teacher from the sound of it, spoke with authority. Miss Beatrice Hall stood next to him, a slim young woman with a severe expression. Sergeant Morgan, the constable in charge, told us that he was holding a light low to safeguard the flame. Arthur Willoughby was in the yard, white-faced and soaked, attempting the back door. It sticks, he exclaimed frantically. It always sticks in wet weather. Julia, for God's sake, Julia. Sore. Morgan responded firmly but not harshly. Step away a moment. If you please. There's no answer, Mr. Delgado remarked. No light. When he got home at 8:30, I told him that I had heard a bang around 7, similar to a chair falling. He laughed. He described Mrs. Willoughby as a peaceful woman who did not enjoy sitting in chairs. I contacted the police. He stated that he could not think so negatively of his good wife. Now, are we standing here to drown? Miss Hall looked at me, then at the door. I was their housemaid, she explained, her voice tense. Mrs. Willoughby sent me away last month because I was ill and couldn't keep up, but I still stopped by to carry the laundry. She wouldn't want us to leave her in there alone. Poirot removed his hat and shook off the rain. Sergeant, permit that I observe first the locks and windows from the outside. You're the gentleman from the hotel, Morgan said. He hesitated and then nodded. Look quick. Poirot's examination was accurate and brief. He stooped under the veranda, peering at the sill where water trickled in thin streams, touching the back door frame with his finger and inspecting the keyhole. He looked at the shutters at the side window. They were bolted from the inside. He bent low at the entrance door, looking at the space between the floor and the threshold. The sway of the lantern revealed a little ruck of fibers, possibly cocoa matting, as well as a smear of dirt. Trebian, he mumbled, then stood back. Morgan positioned his shoulder against the back door. It succumbed immediately with a sigh, as if the house despised the intrusion. We filed in, going slowly and talking little. The rain ran off of us. A persistent small river. The kitchen was immaculate. 2 cups with cocoa skin were on the table. A little pot on the stove had boiled away, leaving a ring of white. The lamp was turned low. A dishcloth hung over a chair. The clock on the wall had stopped at 20.7. Mrs. Willoughby called Morgan's voice even. The sitting room was beyond the square of organized comfort. A shawl folded on an armchair, a gramophone with the lid down, a bookshelf, insurance manuals, Shakespeare, and the Jamaica handbook. The hurricane lamp on the sideboard was tall, bright, and smoked a little. A woman's corpse lay on the floor by the hearth, face to the side, her dark hair against the rug. Arthur Willoughby made a sound that I will not describe. He made one stride and was caught by Morgan's arm, not forcefully but authoritatively. Do not touch, the sergeant instructed. Poirot stepped to the far side of the room, away from the door, and stood still. I've only seen him in that stance a few times, in complete stillness, taking in every line and every detail. Then he knelt, trying to keep his feet on the planks rather than the rug. Mrs. Julia Willoughby, as we must call her, had received a single severe hit to the side of the head. No weapon was in sight. There was less blood at the wound and on the carpeting than I had imagined. Her coat and shoes were not on her. She wore a home dress with stockings. One hand was open, palm up, indicating that she had been astonished. The other was tucked half under her, as if a reflex had attempted to prevent her fall. Her face did not show fear. It seemed insulted. Poirot listened with his fingertips to the flesh of her throat, as he always does, but he never expected the miracle. Madame is dead, he whispered softly. For an hour or more. The blood has minimal flow. The air here is warm. Morgan nodded grimly. He looked at the house phone. There was none. Mr. Delgado, be so good as to go to the corner store and fetch Constable James and the doctor. Miss Hall, please sit for a while. Mr. Willoughby, sir, you must also sit. I cannot, Willoughby replied simply. He leaned against the doorway, shaking. Who would come here? We're quiet people. There's nothing to take. I was sent to an incorrect address. I see it now. Who would? Why? He rested his head on his hands. The rain pounded time against the shutters. Pugh's eyes were active. He touched the brass lock on the front door, then the keyhole. He stared at the mat corral, as I imagined, and at the fiber clump. He examined the inside face of the back door we had forced and touched with little, disdained the smear of swelled paint that had given way so quickly. He looked at the lamp glass, then at the film of soot left by the lamp on the next bookshelf. "Sergeant," he stated, "I will not disturb Madame. But there is a small cupboard in the corner. Can I look?" Morgan replied, "Go ahead. However, leave the drawers exactly as you found them." Poirot didn't open anything. He just gazed. Then he came from the kitchen with a tumbler. He crouched and held the glass over the lamp chimney while catching his breath. "What are you doing, Poirot?" I asked, perplexed. He smiled slightly. "Time for Hastings. When clocks fail to tell the time, lamps do." The doctor arrived. Dr. Emmanuel Redfern was a tall guy with quiet hands, who had been exposed to both heat and suffering before. He validated Poirot's statement and added that the blow was administered by someone who is left-handed, possibly with an iron bar or the edge of a heavy instrument. He couldn't set the time to 1 minute. However, he stated that the body is heated from the room rather than from life. The cocoa was consumed not long before her death. The kettle boiled dry around 7:20, give or take. The steam shook the shelf, which may have caused the clock to stop. It isn't fixed properly. Poirot nodded. "Mercy, doctor." He offered Dr. Redfern the glass containing soot. See, the lamp was only recently turned up high, but the soot on the books behind indicates that it had burned lower earlier in the evening. Someone turned it up to see better after the blow, possibly when looking for anything. Morgan looked around. "We'll get the photographer in the morning," he added. "Tonight we do what is necessary. Mr. Willoughby, sir, I need to know where you were between 6:30 and 9. Willoughby's face was battered with anguish. "I was at the motel, then at Constant Spring, and lost. Consult the tramman. Ask the conductor. Ask at the counter. Ask anyone. I was on a fool's mission. That is the most bitter thing." Poirot mildly inquired, "Who knew you had a chess club on Tuesday?" Willoughby sighed, "Half the office. My wife, of course, Mr. Clark, and I occasionally play when he is in town. But he was not there tonight. Mr. Reuben Clark. Yes. And who held the key to the house?" "Only Julia and I. We keep things simple." He paused. "Miss Hall Beatrice had one, but we took it when she went." Julia was specific. Miss Hall blushed. "Mrs. Willoughby did well," she stated evenly. "These are her ways." But she was kind. "When I had a fever, she offered me soup." Morgan inquired without sarcasm, "Does any man call at your door in the evenings?" Willoughby said, "No one. We are not the house for gaiety." "Did your wife keep money here?" He motioned to the small closed container on the sideboard. "Petty cash for stamps. Perhaps the second household. I don't know. We are careful with our money." Morgan tested the tin. It was locked. "We'll open it at the station," he announced. Poirot had taken another stride towards the shelves. He drew his finger along the row, revealing a clean line where dust and lamp smoke should be, as well as a thin gap where a book had been withdrawn and reinserted, but was not quite flush. He slid it out. The Jamaica Handbook. Something fluttered. A tram transfer. The conductor shreds the small ticket with his punch. He held it up. "Not mine," Willoughby dully replied. "I kept mine in my wallet for the trip home." "It is not from today," Poirot sniffed, surprising me. "It is damp just from the room and not from the rain. And it smells like smoke, not just tobacco, but also of small Jamaican sherrits that are unpleasant to the stomach." He placed the ticket in an envelope and scrawled a note with a stub pencil. "Sergeant Morgan, to appease your conscience, I will tell you right now that I do not believe Mr. Willoughby murdered his wife in the nighttime window. It is too clunky, and he is a cautious individual." Morgan released a little grunt. He went on to say that careful men also kill. Sometimes they plot careful crimes. "Yes," said Poirot. "Sometimes the voice that sends them on an empty errand is closer to home than they realize." A fresh breeze rocked the shutters like a man playing a drum. The rain poured down in sheets. In the stillness that followed, I believed I could hear the sea faintly. Chapter 3. The Abode of Sticks and Smoke. We were offered accommodations at the police barracks that night because the storm rendered further travel unnecessary. Poirot reclined on his small cot as if it were a chaise and meticulously arranged his patent leather shoes. You notice, Hastings, that the door we couldn't open gave way to a shove. Despite his considerable power, Mr. Willoughby failed. Why? Because he was frantic. Perhaps because the door was latched on the first attempt rather than stiff. But we noticed the latch. From the inside, said Poirot. From the outside, a string beneath the door and a cunning push. There are tricks for children. Then it was staged. I'm not sure who did this. He folded his hands across his tummy. Cocoa for two, the bulb low and then high. The clock that stops at 7:20 without assistance from a shaky shelf. I don't have faith in that. The neighbor who hears a thud at 7, the hotel phone call scheduled for 8, the tram, the rain, and the ticket smelling faintly of Sherritt. Poirot stated that any number of men smoke, but our Mr. Reuben Clark does so using attic air. He smoked one alongside me at the hotel last night, complaining about his digestion while enjoying it. But Clark was in Port Antonio. That's what Mr. Willoughby believes. By 10 a.m. the next day, the storm had passed, leaving the air clean and fresh. The light beamed on the puddles and created mirrors. The hills appeared very close, as if one could reach out a hand and draw them in like curtains. Kingston repaired itself. Men moved branches to the side of the road. Women shake out rugs. The tram rang its bell and drove off as if the night had never happened. We started at the telephone exchange. The switchboard girls worked efficiently. The supervisor, a woman with intelligent eyes, retrieved her book. Yes, she answered. A call to Mr. Willoughby Myrtle Bank was placed from the hotel instrument at 6:45 p.m. yesterday. The gentleman introduced himself as Mr. Quayle, or Quayle. I wrote it with an E. He asked for Mr. Willoughby's name. Describe the voice, said Poirot. Educated, cautious. Island, but not strong. He said, business like a man working in an office. Did he cough? She seemed astonished. He cleared his throat several times before asking me to repeat the street. He whispered softly, like if someone was nearby. Mercy. We headed to Myrtle Bank. The clerk remembers the call too well. He stood here, he continued, pointing to the tablet. I did not ask his name. I believed he was a guest. A guest's acquaintance, wearing a short brim hat and a pale suit, despite the fact that the sky appeared like the inside of a pot. Mr. Clark, I inquired. The clerk thought, he has a mustache. This person possessed none. But I can't swear. The hat brim casts shadows. I only recall him leaning his elbow against the column in an unsettling manner, as if he were too comfortable with other people's furnishings. Poirot wasn't disheartened. Neat and delicate. To relax, one does whatever they can. I should give them up. Poirot inquired, were you in Port Antonio yesterday evening? Unfortunately, yeah, Clark replied, widening his hands. 30 miles with a storm in between. I can show you my ticket. I ate dinner at the Titchfield. That was a horrible thing to say, but the fish was delicious. There are witnesses. I arrived at dawn when I heard. And Mr. Arthur's chess night. Clark admitted, I knew about it. He is committed to Tuesdays. I don't attend very often. It's late, and my rooms are uptown. Mr. Clark, said Poirot smoothly. Have you ever heard of Garden Crescent East? Clark frowned. Is it near the crossroads? I confess I am no map. Is this merely a curiosity? Poirot spoke. Another. Do you have the keys to Mr. Willoughby's house? Perhaps check on him if he is ill. Clark's smile became tight. "Certainly not," he replied. "Arthur is a jealous husband in the smallest details. He counts his spoons but does not count them. He refused to offer a key to his own brother." Poirot whispered, "That is wise. We left him with his ledgers." Outside, Poirot touched my arm. He mentioned that he is left-handed. "Clark, you saw him use his left hand to gesture and sign. He has some ink on the border of his hand." Hastings delivered the punch on Mrs. Willie's head. Dr. Reddern claimed it came from the left. "You can't hang a man on a chariot and a hand." "No, but someone can illuminate the way." In the afternoon, we spoke with Miss Beatrice Hall again. She lived 2 lanes away, in a little room overlooking a breadfruit tree. She offered us chairs with great pride. "Madam," Poirot explained, "he frequently calls women madame and is adored for it." "You stated last night that you were discharged due to illness." "Yes," she answered. "I developed a fever." Mrs. Willoughby enjoyed having her house sparkle. She said I may come back when I was better if no one else had taken my seat. I became well, but I did not return. "It's silly," she said, lifting her chin. Mr. Willoughby occasionally stared, not in a nasty way, but in the way of a guy checking to see if the silver was polished. But I didn't like it. I enjoy working in an environment where I am not being monitored. "Did you keep the key?" "No," Miss Hall replied with a fast bite of the word. "I returned it the same day I departed." Mr. Willoughby counted the keys on the keyring. "And yesterday," said Poirot, "did you notice anyone around the house?" "She told me I died at the age of 5. Mrs. Willoughby waved through the slats of the shutters. "I brought back the white shirt collars I had starched." Following that, she shook her head. "Only the rain and Mr. Delgado brushing his stairs, as if the storm were a particular enemy. Mr. Delgado himself greeted us, holding a violin on his knee. He set it aside with drama. He said, 'I heard the thud,' as if he were repeating his best line. My clock read 7 o'clock. I was practicing. I laid the bow down. I listened. Then rain, followed by silence. He said, if I had known, I would have knocked right away. But one does not invade. And Mrs. Willoughby is the type of lady who writes you a note if you offend her, rather than shouting at you from the window." "Has anyone called?" asked Poirot. At 6, a youngster arrived with a message for the Delgados on the next block. "Poor fellow, he's all drenched." I handed him a towel for his head. Thereafter, no. "And the key to your home? Does any man borrow it?" He seemed offended. "My wife isn't a lending library." Poirot bowed, unaffected by the man's vanity. "Mercy." Sergeant Morgan returned to the barracks and opened the tin from the Willoughby sideboard. Inside were 2 sovereigns, a handful of little coins, and a folded piece of paper that turned out to be a list of insurance numbers and initials. A private memorandum for household use, and possibly nothing else. Morgan clarified that it was not a robbery. "No," Poirot said. "Not that type. And your pal Clark," Morgan claimed, "has an alibi as thick as cane juice. Titchfield Hotel. 6 men remember him because he told them the fish story in a light-hearted manner. This morning, they enjoyed telling me that they had a great time." Poirot's eyes are partly closed. He called from Myrtle Bank at 6:45 and said he'd be at the Titchfield at 7:30. One can rent an automobile. However, it is limited. When one calls the day before and requests that the bill be placed on the room, but the clerk cannot remember the name. Regardless, it is not impossible. Morgan gave him a long glance. "Mr. Poirot, you are not the cops here," he explained politely. "No," Poirot said. "I am a man whose friend admires a meticulous line in chess and does not want to see him punished for a careless guess." He rose. "Come, Hastings. We'll walk to Orange Street once more. The storm has told us a lot. We must request a rerun." We arrived at the cottage about sunset. The Siebes provided a fresh scent. The house seemed smaller in the new light. Poirot walked towards the front entrance. The Quo mat was dry and fluffy. He knelt and lifted the edge. A small bit of fish line lay there, almost unnoticeable, moist and sticky from muck. It darted under the door. "Voila," he said. "A children's trick. Pull from the exterior and lift the latch." "But who would know to do it?" "Someone who grew up with such doors and mischief," observed Poirot. He peered at the gridlock. A new lock had brushed on the metal, leaving a bright, clean mark. New within a month. When the mate is replaced and the key is returned, it is installed. And the tram ticket was inserted into a book by a mindlessly reaching hand. Poirot explained. A left hand, a man clearing up his messy appearance. And the lamp line. A man who lowered the lamp to be comfy with cocoa and raised it to look for something small, flat, and crucial. Perhaps a card, a receipt, or a key. The lamp indicates he lingered to search. The clock indicates that he wanted us to believe the blow came at a time when Mr. Willoughby would be far away. We stood quite quietly. The cottage creaked like a ship. Chapter 4. The Man Holding the Chariot. Kingston sparkled, clean and innocent, as if storms were European inventions, and the island had awoken laughing at the whole notion. In that clear light, the Willoughby affair appeared to be a fever dream, but sadness does not wash away with gutters. When we briefly encountered Arthur Willey in Sergeant Morgan's office, his face was flattened, as if he had slept without rest. He just responded to what was requested and then left as softly as a clerical officer lays down a pen. In contrast, Poirot was meticulous. He enjoyed his breakfast, patted a slice of pawpaw into submission, and then announced the march order. "Today, Hastings, we will test the most natural hypothesis until it fails," he explained. "Only when one has worried the fake thread can the true one show." "You mean Clark," I replied. "Who else wears his costume so obediently?" "He sits in the shop window, a left-handed connoisseur of small cheroots, with Mr. Willey's trust and knowledge of his chestnut habits. He raised a delicate finger, but we don't buy too hastily." Sergeant Morgan possessed a more robust mentality. He stated that if he did not do it, he would have missed his calling. "The Titchfield alibi is the only sticker." "Then let us go to the paste pot," Poirot suggested. The Titchfield looked like a clean ship above Port Antonio. Its verandas were spacious, its palms behaved well, and even the ceiling fans were lovely. We chatted with a waitress who recognized Mr. Clark because he was fussy about fish. He had arrived, the guy reasoned, before the squall made the lighting flicker, and had recounted a humorous tale about a policyholder who insured his parrot. The bartender nodded. Yes, a pale man with a tidy mustache, or possibly not a mustache. One loses count of facial hair amid a deluge. There was a signed register, Our Clark. In room 12, time of entry, 6:55 p.m. Poirot scrutinized the ink as though it were a suspect. He breathed on it. He gazed from the side. He smiled. "Fresh ink smudges," I said, anxious to be useful. "Mon ami, this ink is yesterday's," he said, amused. "However, time is a performance. Notice how 6 is placed over an imperfect 7. If our Mr. Clark is who he claims to be, he has modified his arrival on the page to benefit his conscience." The clerk produced a bellboy with a strong recall and a keen sense of detail. Mr. Clark had not appeared at once, he explained. He had left a tiny luggage earlier in the afternoon by arrangement, then returned wet and flustered around 7:30, wanted hot water, and sat down to dinner with an appetite unusual for a man of his size. Poirot spoke gently. So he had 2 guys at the Titchfield, the luggage, man at 5 p.m. and the dining man at 8 p.m., between 5 and 8. I said, "The road from Kingston is long and slick." "Not too long," Morgan replied. "For a leased car with a driver who knows the corners." We went back to town, the day already fading into another dazzling dusk. Poirot first stopped at Caribbean Mutual. He requested, respectfully, to see the policy ledgers handled by Mr. Clark and Mr. Willoughby. The manager, a round man who didn't like the idea of scandal, rolled his eyes and gave in. In my opinion, that was the worst of afternoons. Columns, initials, receipts, renewals. Poirot in a state of neatness. Morgan taking notes with a patient known only to cops and fishers. But eventually Poirot tapped a page. "Regard," he said, "a minor irregularity. Mr. Clark receipted 3 cash premiums for the same life, which were posted to suspense for 1 night before being cleared without a bank record. Tiny sums, nothing to worry about aboard." Morgan grumbled, "But it's a habit, Pitet. And Mrs. Willoughby, as a home that sparkles, notices what is not polished. She threatens to inform her spouse. He silences her." "It's plausible," said Poirot. "Plausible is not yet the truth." He closed the ledger with a sigh of, "Then say what you like the least," whispered Poirot. She appeared pleased and scandalized. "She told me once that Mr. Clark is the type of guy who believes every lady loves his comments." She laughed. She remarked, "Poor man. He flirts with intention." "I prefer my arithmetic," said Frank. This is exactly what she stated. "And was Mr. Willoughby a jealous husband?" inquired Poirot. Mrs. Phipps replied, "Not in the vulgar sense," as if the vulgar sense could be expected to stay within its bounds. "He would not make a scene, but he stores his dignity a locked box and double-checks it." We thanked her and departed before tea was pushed on us. "Flotation is a motive of convenience," said Poirot in the street. "It will suffice in a novel. It does not satisfy the small gray cells unless there is additional money. Yes, exposure is important, but let's discover a fact that bites." As it turned out, he discovered it at Myrtle Bank in the most mundane way. When challenged again, the clerk at the counter remembered another scrap. He wore a pastel suit that had been recently ironed. He leaned against the pillar with his left elbow, as if fatigued. The brim of his hat swayed. I can't swear to a mustache. If I understand correctly, he was ordinary amazing. Poirot did. He sincerely thanked the man and left him feeling good about himself for the first time since the storm. Poirot claimed he uses his left elbow to hold the receiver to his right ear, as is customary for a left-handed person. It's a little star in an otherwise pitch-black sky. "You are constructing a case," I said. "I'm building a house of sticks," he kindly corrected. I wish the Wolf would blow. The Wolf obliged with a new witness. In a path off Orange Street, a woman with a basket of fruit greeted Sergeant Morgan and told him, in the pleasant manner of individuals who enjoy being useful to the police, that she had seen the pale office gentleman near the Willoughby house about 6 p.m. on the stormy evening. He had stood beneath Mr. Delgado's eave, lighting a little cigarillo. He coughed, made a face as if the flavor bothered him, and went to the Willoughby gate to knock. "Why did you not say so before?" Morgan demanded politely. She raised her chin. "Because the rain was like a whip last night, and I sold oranges first thing this morning. The police do not usually buy oranges." Poirot, delighted by the reasoning, purchased 2 and peeled one with the precision of a jeweler. He puzzled about a little cheroot that upset his stomach. Ebion, I could feel the fragments settling. The fish line beneath the door, the lamp raised to search, the wiped cup, the left-handed blow, the phone call, the fake street, the pale suit, the cough, and the cheeret. When, an hour later, Sergeant Morgan took Mr. Clark at his office to aid with inquiries, I confess that I felt a satisfaction that one should not experience when a noose is tightened. Clark arrived quietly, but with an air of offense. In the interview room, he appeared relaxed. Poirot sat with delicate patience. Morgan did the speaking. "You went to see Mrs. Willoughby at 6 o'clock, Morgan remarked. "You drank chocolate. You argued. You hit her. You set the clock to 20.7. You raised the lamp to look for the paper she had written. You exited by lifting the latch with a string. Then you called to send her husband on a fool's errand and drove to Port Antonio, where you made your room appear older by sending your suitcase ahead. You smoked a recognizable cheroot and signed a time in a book that was not your first. Will you explain why? Clark's pale face barely changed. That is as Zay described the story as delightful. I'm sorry that I cannot provide you with an ending. Your left hand is stained with ink, I yelled in support of Morgan's attack. And you're right about gallantry. He responded with a flair that told me he hadn't yet considered himself defeated. Poirot brushed a bit of dust off his patent leather shoe. See, I only have one question. Do you drink cocoa while dining? Clark gazed. Cocoa? Certainly not. It knocks me sideways. Tea sometimes. Typically, it is soda water. Tang, said Poirot quietly. A delicacy of digestion. Morgan leaned forward. You'll tell us where you were at 6. Clark immediately packed a bag and added, at my lodgings. My landlord will say so. I left it with a kid to bring to Titchfield, along with a message. I boarded the 6 o'clock vehicle and stopped at Myrtlebank to call. I didn't. He might have said more, but a constable arrived with a neatly wrapped package. Sergeant, he said, was discovered behind the desk and slipped down the wall. It was a little flat key on a ribbon. Morgan placed it on the table with satisfaction. For what door does it serve? Poirot inquired. The back door, Clark exclaimed before he could stop himself, and his face became scarlet like a schoolboy caught off guard. Morgan pounced. You have been there often enough to know that. Clark clenched his jaw. I am a man who notices locks, he explained. It is my trade. He remained quiet after that. Morgan, having neatly positioned him in the center of the web, was content to let him stick. We came away, I admit, with the flush of men who had witnessed something done correctly. A breeze lifted the veranda leaves as if to applaud. It fits, I said. Everything fits. Poirot remained silent for a dozen strides before speaking softly. Almost. He held up one finger. A solitary detail, mon ami, that irritates me like a chip in the rim of a beautiful cup. You listen to Mr. Clark. Cocoa upsets him. Our eyewitness witnessed him light a cheroot and cough with disgust. The cleaned cocoa cups reveal that a man drank unwillingly. But if cocoa is so harmful for him, why even drink it? Why not refuse? There is also a second splinter, a knot in the fishing line under the door. A knot? A bow line across a bight. Sailor's job, Hastings. It isn't taught in offices. It is taught where ropes are important. Delgado, I speculated. He plays the violin. Strings Rosen. Fiddlers tie bows, sailors tie lives, said Poirot, and Delgado is vain but steadfast. Remember the tramboy who was dispatched to the Delgados on the next street with a towel for his head. Remember also Dr. Redfern's calm statement. The clock may have stopped due to the steam, he said abruptly, as if to divert our attention away from the finger that turned the hands. You suspect, I said. He shakes his head. I don't suspect. I observe. Clark stands before us like a mannequin, dressed to be guilty, and he may be guilty. But when a suit is overly well cut, I search for a tailor. We walked on. The dusk gathered with the efficiency of an island night, with lighting turned off and a phonograph far away playing something nostalgic. The scrape of a chair, the faint tap of a shutter, all normal sounds until one hears a woman's body on a parlor rug. So what happens now? I asked. Poirot instructed us to gently pull the string that was supposed to be invisible. We'll see a landlord, a doctor, and a man who hears thuds. And if I'm correct, the calm square Mr. Willoughby mentioned will reveal a move that no one in the chess club has yet anticipated. He grinned, but not joyfully. For tonight we leave Mr. Clark to study his reflection in the cell window. Tomorrow we'll ask the storm to tell us its story again. But this time, Hastings, We'll listen for the silence between the peals rather than the thunder." He raised his hat to a passing lady and to the increasing dusk, said almost to himself, "Beware the evidence that arrives on time." Chapter 5. The Quiet Man in the Mirror. The island had that bleached brilliance which follows a storm, the sort of dawn that makes even the cops feel fleeting. However, the quarters were cramped, airless, and reeked of paper and worry. Sergeant Morgan greeted us with a sense of grim accomplishment. "He confessed," he said. "You are Mr. Clark. I wrote it at night. I took poison just after." Poe looked up slowly from the tips of his sneakers. "So soon?" Morgan gave him a page folded in quarters. "I killed Julia Willoughby. The phone call was mine. Garden Crescent East was a work of fiction. I can't live with it. Forgive me." A Clark. Poirot read it twice, like another man might taste a source. He whispered, "Neat. Too nice. The handwriting is peaceful, rather than painful." He was calm, Morgan added. The guard heard him humming before the lights went out. Poirot lifted his finger. "Men do hum before weddings and hangings, but not before taking strychnine. It's not a musical poison. We saw the body." Clark lay calmly on the cot, one hand curled as if respectfully, declining further debate. The matchbox that had contained the substance sat open on the stool. Poirot bent, sniffed, and frowned. He responded, "Bitter almonds, but no glass of water. How does a man ingest powder without a liquid bar?" "He doesn't." Dr. Redfern appeared serious and cold. He felt cramps, convulsions, and other characteristic symptoms. "I've seen this with self-poisoning before." "Ah," Poirot murmured, peering at him through the silver rims of his eyes. "You've witnessed a lot of tidy deaths." Redfern blinked. "I beg your pardon." "Never mind," answered Poirot gently. When he was gone, Poe went to Morgan. "Seal the cell. I will not have this small theater disturbed." Back in Myrtlebank, he ate papaya silently. I waited for the third slice. "Surely this is the end of it," I said. "He confessed." Poirot dabbed his lips. "Mon Hastings. A confession could end a trial. It rarely concludes a story. The voice that called Mr. Willoughby from his hotel. The voice is still speaking. We merely mistook the direction from which it originated. Do you think Clark was forced to swallow poison?" "Someone made him appear to," said Poirot. "But let's not gallop. First, we revisit the stage of the disaster. The Willoughby cottage had been straightened, yet grief lingered in corners like dust. Poe went through it with the stillness of a man counting his own heartbeats. "Hastings, take note. The kettle has been replaced, the carpeting has been cleaned, and the clock has been restored. It is the home of a meticulous man who cannot tolerate disorder. Arthur Willoughby, possibly." Poirot bent beside the lamp. "See the new wick and the fresh oil? He came here after the cops and made things right. One may call it devotion or guilt." He checked the front door latch again. The Polish mark was wider now. "He's opened and closed it since the ceiling." "Why?" We heard footsteps behind us. It was Willoughby, hat in hand, face hollow yet steady. "I couldn't leave," he explained simply. "This is my wife's residence." Pugh's tone softened. "You have visited here several times." "Only to bring her belongings close by." Poirot nodded slowly. "To be near or ensure that nothing new appears." Willoughby appeared perplexed. "Monsieur Poirot, I vow to you." Poirot touched his arm. "Tranquil, tranquil. The truth is best revealed when one stops pursuing it." When he left, I burst out. "You don't really suspect him. The man is broken." Poirot stated, "Broken things cut my hand." He cherished order. His wife died. His house is in disarray. He recreates the scene exactly as previously. Tell me, Hastings, does that imply devotion or rehearsal? I had no response. That afternoon, we paid another visit to Miss Hall. The small room smelled like starch and ironed linen. She appeared healthy, but frightened. "Did Mrs. Willoughby ever speak harshly of her husband?" asked Poirot. "Never be cruel," she added. It was as if he were two men, one who smiled and one who measured the grin afterwards. Poirot's eyebrows rose. "Oh, a man who lives by double entry." She frightened for him, the girl continued, saying he occasionally worked too late at the office alone, even after the clerks had left. She said he'd become secretive, writing things down and storing them away. Poirot thanked her, but I noticed the notion take root in his head. By evening, the air had pressed down again, heavy like a damp cloth. We sat on the veranda while the sea turned from steel to ink. Morgan arrived sweating. "The autopsy was completed," he said. "The poison struck 9 just right. The same as in Nox Vomica. Clark had enough to kill 2 men. But we don't know where he obtained it. Red Fern saves some. The pharmacists only sell it under license. And Willie's office keeps a tonic with a hint of it." Poirot looked up sharply. Morgan described his office as one for nervous complaints. "A shipping client." Poirot whispered, "The bottles are locked, though. A lock that may open with more than one key." He rose abruptly. "Sergeant, you'll oblige me. Place a policeman by Willoughby Cottage tonight. No one is allowed to enter. Tomorrow, I believe we'll locate someone who can't resist one final visit." I barely slept. Poirot awoke me at dawn, immaculate as ever. "Come, Hastings. The mouse has stirred." We got to Orange Street, just as the light turned silver. The cop on duty saluted with excitement. "Sir, around 4, a man arrived." He entered with his own key. I waited for him to leave at 5. "Describe him," Poirot asked. We couldn't see his face. He wore a coat over his head and took short, delicate steps, similar to tiptoeing. Almost everything inside the room appeared the same as it did when we left. Poirot went directly to the desk. A drawer hung slightly open. Inside, there's a folded paper and a small flat key on a ribbon. He opened the newspaper. It was Julia Willoughby's handwriting. "My darling Arthur, you are overly trusting. Mr. Clark is vain but not malicious. The figures I mentioned were not his, but rather someone else's. I will speak tonight, even if it hurts you to hear it." Poirot exhaled. "Ah, the storm has begun again." "The figures," I explained. "She discovered certain irregularities." "Perhaps," said Poirot, "but take notice of the date. Tuesday a.m. She meant to talk that very night. Someone else has read this before us. The drawer has a recent scratch on it, and the key next it belongs to a cash container rather than her desk. Mr. Willoughby's tin, perhaps." Morgan seemed uneasy. "You're not saying—" Poirot's voice was soft. "I say nothing. But the calm man, the orderly man, the one who moves pieces across a chessboard while telling himself it's business. Such folks can even create voices for telephones." He took the letter and pocketed it. "We'll keep this for now. Let no one know we found it." As we stepped outside, thunder rumbled across the hills. "Another storm," I remarked. Pooh shakes his head. "The same Hastings. It's been circling all along." He turned back to the small cottage with its closed jealousies and said, "Tomorrow, my friend, the game will end, and it will not end where we began." Chapter 6. The Quiet Square. The sky was clear by 10 a.m. the next day, but Kingston still felt the effects of the previous day's rain. Poirot drafted 3 notes before breakfast, one for Sergeant Morgan, one for the jailer, and one for Mr. Arthur Willoughby, and had them delivered with the precision of a man rearranging pieces on a board. We met in the small counting room at Caribbean Mutual, Morgan near the filing cabinet, and Dr. Redford, somber and noncommittal. Willoughby was at his desk, exact as a ledger, and I was at the window, looking out at the harbor like a strip of fallen silk. Poirot remained standing. He touched the blotter with his fingertip. "Miss," he added gently, "we've let the case neatly form itself around Mr. Clark. Curtains look nice when they're clean. Murder is a risk." Willoughby's mouth twitched. "You have formed an opinion." "I have formed a geometry," replied Poirot. "Let us draw it together." He held up a slip. "The first point is a phone call to Myrtle Bank, made from the hotel's instrument at 6:45. The caller identified himself as Mr. Quayle and asked for you by name." He turned to show the supervisor the exchange note he had obtained. The supervisor described the voice as informed and careful. He even cleared his throat and spoke carefully, like if someone was there. The name provided was not Mr. Clark. It did not have to be. It only needs to be credible. A mask to lead you to the pillar phone, where you will repeat the false street in order for others to hear it. Later in the records, he glanced at the motel clerk's recall. A pale outfit. The left elbow leaned against the column. Ordinary, extraordinary. Willie's hands lie softly on the desk. Many men could do it. Many. "No," answered Poirot. "Few men are as familiar with your Tuesday habit. Fewer yet would risk a bogus address that was accurate enough to pass through the ear. Garden Crescent East, but non-existent to the Tranman. It is an overly ambitious invention." He laid the slip down. "Second point, the scene in your parlor. Chocolate for two. A kettle boiled to nothing. The clock stopped at 7:20. A lamp was turned low at first, then elevated high to search. The books behind display the lengthy soot, chimney glass, fresh breath, and door. The lock that usually clings in damp weather, which gave the first time to Sergeant Morgan's shoulder but beat you. But under the choir mat, a length of mud-soaked fishing line ran beneath the door, allowing a hand outside to pull and raise the catch. The mark on the jamb was bright and new. The latch was recently installed after the cleaner left, and the keys were returned. Morgan nodded, despite himself. Third point, the ticket was tucked under the Jamaica handbook and smelled faintly of chirrut smoke, our Mr. Clark's little addiction. Poirot's look was cool. It was not saturated by rain, merely by the warm air in the room. A hand hurriedly left in its reach, slid in to clean up its own mess. Redfern's gaze shifted to Willoughby. Willie's stare remained stationary. Poirot's voice softened. Against Mr. Clark, everything was perfectly aligned and too pretty. The left-handed co-worker wearing a pale suit and coughing. The telephone hour may be reconciled with a quick drive to Titchfield. The luggage delivered earlier makes the register appear older than the man. We tested the thread. Yes, Hustacabras. He made a modest sorry motion. It broke where all false threads do at the human detail. Clark detested cocoa. Why drink it to calm his anxiety when tea will suffice? Why wipe a cup that he would not willingly raise? He turned a page in his notepad. Fourth point. After that, everything was repaired. Mr. Willoughby, I returned to your cottage and discovered the latch scar had grown larger. The lamp had been oiled, and the neat place had become even cleaner. The constable maintained watch yesterday night on my request. Near morning, a tiny man entered with his own key and left before 5. Inside, a drawer was partially open. It contained a flat tin key on a ribbon, as well as Madame's handwritten letter. My darling Arthur, you are overly trusting. Mr. Clark is vain, but not malicious. The figures I mentioned were not his, but rather someone else's. I will speak tonight, even if it hurts you to hear it. He laid the folded paper on the desk and gently lay his palm on top of it. Morgan took a breath. In that sentence, said Poirot slowly, is the motive that is not melodrama, but life, not jealousy. Not romance, arithmetic, small irregularities. Tiny sums diverted in a careful office, set right later. So the board need never blush. A wife who keeps her house spotless notices a smudge when others do not. She intends to talk pleasantly, yet openly. That very evening, he let silence do its work. The rest, he said softly, is the geometry of terror. At 6:45, a man who values order creates a voice to distract himself. He circles back in the rain to frighten his wife into silence, showing her how mischief begins with a phone call and a lie. She has already written, possibly even posted. Words, wrath, and a single stroke. She collapses. There is no plan to murder. There is just a sudden and awful impulse to tidy what cannot be tidied. Poirot moved one finger an inch, as if nudging a chess player into check. The lamp is turned up high. One hunts for a note. The clock shifts to a friendly lie. The string is laid. The door was secured from the outside. The cheroot ticket dropped onto the shelf. The cocoa cup wiped. The latch prank is ready to be played in front of the neighbors and the cops. Later, when suspicion falls on the coworker, who is left-handed, vain, wearing a pale suit and coughing, the orderly mind praises heaven. Tidier still, the man dies in his cell and leaves a small letter. "Excuse me, Sergeant, your neatness is excessive. Too punctual. Strychnine in a dry room with no glass in sight." He cast a peek at Morgan. "You have the jailer's book." Morgan Grimm has now opened it. Last night's entry time was 7:15. A Willoughby parcel for R. Clark. Powder for the stomach matches. He expressed concern for a colleague. Poirot tilted his head. "Mercy. And I have the office inventory that the sergeant was so kind as to bring me this morning. Your firm has a shipping client. A tonic containing nux vomica and strychnine in a minute dose. When measured, it is harmless, but when you moisten the inside fold of a piece of paper and dust it down the crease, it becomes lethal. The pharmacists only sell it under license. And Willie's office keeps a tonic with a hint of it." Poirot looked up sharply. Morgan described his office as one for nervous complaints. "A shipping client." Poirot whispered, "The bottles are locked, though. A lock that may open with more than one key." He rose abruptly. "Sergeant, you'll oblige me. Place a policeman by Willoughby Cottage tonight. No one is allowed to enter. Tomorrow, I believe we'll locate someone who can't resist one final visit." I barely slept. Poirot awoke me at dawn, immaculate as ever. "Come, Hastings." The mouse has stirred. We got to Orange Street, just as the light turned silver. The cop on duty saluted with excitement. "Sir, around 4, a man arrived. He entered with his own key. I waited for him to leave at 5. "Describe him," Poirot asked. We couldn't see his face. He wore a coat over his head and took short, delicate steps, similar to tiptoeing. Almost everything inside the room appeared the same as it did when we left. Poirot went directly to the desk. A drawer hung slightly open. Inside, there's a folded paper and a small flat key on a ribbon. He opened the newspaper. It was Julia Willoughby's handwriting. "My darling Arthur, you are overly trusting. Mr. Clark is vain but not malicious. The figures I mentioned were not his, but rather someone else's. I will speak tonight, even if it hurts you to hear it." Poirot exhaled. "Ah, the storm has begun again." "The figures," I explained. "She discovered certain irregularities." "Perhaps," said Poirot, "but take notice of the date. Tuesday a.m. She meant to talk that very night. Someone else has read this before us. The drawer has a recent scratch on it, and the key next it belongs to a cash container rather than her desk. Mr. Willoughby's tin, perhaps." Morgan seemed uneasy. "You're not saying—" Poirot's voice was soft. "I say nothing. But the calm man, the orderly man, the one who moves pieces across a chessboard while telling himself it's business. Such folks can even create voices for telephones." He took the letter and pocketed it. "We'll keep this for now. Let no one know we found it." As we stepped outside, thunder rumbled across the hills. "Another storm," I remarked. Pooh shakes his head. "The same Hastings. It's been circling all along." He turned back to the small cottage with its closed jealousies and said, "Tomorrow, my friend, the game will end, and it will not end where we began." Chapter 6. The Quiet Square. The sky was clear by 10 a.m. the next day, but Kingston still felt the effects of the previous day's rain. Poirot drafted 3 notes before breakfast, one for Sergeant Morgan, one for the jailer, and one for Mr. Arthur Willoughby, and had them delivered with the precision of a man rearranging pieces on a board. We met in the small counting room at Caribbean Mutual, Morgan near the filing cabinet, and Dr. Redford, somber and noncommittal. Willoughby was at his desk, exact as a ledger, and I was at the window, looking out at the harbor like a strip of fallen silk. Poirot remained standing. He touched the blotter with his fingertip. "Miss," he added gently, "we've let the case neatly form itself around Mr. Clark. Curtains look nice when they're clean. Murder is a risk." Willoughby's mouth twitched. "You have formed an opinion." "I have formed a geometry," replied Poirot. "Let us draw it together." He held up a slip. "The first point is a phone call to Myrtlebank, made from the hotel's instrument at 6:45. The caller identified himself as Mr. Quayle and asked for you by name." He turned to show the supervisor the exchange note he had obtained. The supervisor described the voice as informed and careful. He even cleared his throat and spoke carefully, like if someone was there. The name provided was not Mr. Clark. It did not have to be. It only needs to be credible. A mask to lead you to the pillar phone, where you will repeat the false street in order for others to hear it. Later in the records, he glanced at the motel clerk's recall. A pale outfit. The left elbow leaned against the column. Ordinary, extraordinary. Willie's hands lie softly on the desk. Many men could do it. Many. "No," answered Poirot. "Few men are as familiar with your Tuesday habit. Fewer yet would risk a bogus address that was accurate enough to pass through the ear. Garden Crescent East, but non-existent to the Trannon. It is an overly ambitious invention." He laid the slip down. "Second point, the scene in your parlor. Chocolate for 2. A kettle boiled to nothing. The clock stopped at 7:20. A lamp was turned low at first, then elevated high to search. The books behind display the lengthy soot, chimney glass, fresh breath, and door. The lock that usually clings in damp weather, which gave the first time to Sergeant Morgan's shoulder but beat you. But under the choir mat, a length of mud-soaked fishing line ran beneath the door, allowing a hand outside to pull and raise the catch. The mark on the jamb was bright and new. The latch was recently installed after the cleaner left, and the keys were returned. Morgan nodded despite himself. Third point, the ticket was tucked under the Jamaica handbook and smelled faintly of churret smoke. Our Mr. Clark's little addiction. Poirot's look was cool. It was not saturated by rain, merely by the warm air in the room. A hand hurriedly left in its reach slid in to clean up its own mess. Redfern's gaze shifted to Willoughby. Willie's stare remained stationary. Poirot's voice softened. Against Mr. Clark, everything was perfectly aligned and too pretty. The left-handed co-worker wearing the pale suit and coughing. The telephone hour may be reconciled with a quick drive to Titchfield. The luggage delivered earlier makes the register appear older than the man. We tested the thread. Yes, Hustacabras. He made a modest sorry motion. It broke where all false threads do at the human detail. Clark detested cocoa. Why drink it to calm his anxiety when tea will suffice? Why wipe a cup that he would not willingly raise? He turned a page in his notepad. Fourth point. After that, everything was repaired. Mr. Willoughby, I returned to your cottage and discovered the latch scar had grown larger. The lamp had been oiled, and the neat place had become even cleaner. The constable maintained watch yesterday night on my request. Near morning, a tiny man entered with his own key and left before 5. Inside, a drawer was partially open. It contained a flat tin key on a ribbon, as well as Madame's handwritten letter. My darling Arthur, you are overly trusting. Mr. Clark is vain, but not malicious. The figures I mentioned were not his, but rather someone else's. I will speak tonight, even if it hurts you to hear it." He laid the folded paper on the desk and gently lay his palm on top of it. Morgan took a breath. "In that sentence," said Poirot slowly, "is the motive that is not melodrama, but life, not jealousy. Not romance, arithmetic, small irregularities. Tiny sums diverted in a careful office, set right later. So the board need never blush. A wife who keeps her house spotless notices a smudge when others do not. She intends to talk pleasantly, yet openly. That very evening, he lets silence do its work. The rest, he said softly, is the geometry of terror. At 6:45, a man who values order creates a voice to distract himself. He circles back in the rain to frighten his wife into silence, showing her how mischief begins with a phone call and a lie. She has already written, possibly even posted. Words, wrath, and a single stroke. She collapses. There is no plan to murder. There is just a sudden and awful impulse to tidy what cannot be tidied. Poirot moved one finger an inch, as if nudging a chess player into check. The lamp is turned up high. One hunts for a note. The clock shifts to a friendly lie. The string is laid. The door was secured from the outside. The cheroot ticket dropped onto the shelf. The cocoa cup wiped. The latch prank is ready to be played in front of the neighbors and the cops. Later, when suspicion falls on the co-worker, who is left-handed, vain, wearing a pale suit and coughing, the orderly mind praises heaven. Tidier still, the man dies in his cell and leaves a small letter. "Excuse me, Sergeant, your neatness is excessive. Too punctual. Strychnine in a dry room, with no glass in sight." He cast a peek at Morgan. "You have the jailer's book." Morgan Grimm has now opened it. Last night's entry time was 7:15, a Willoughby parcel for R. Clark, powder for the stomach matches. He expressed concern for a colleague. Poirot tilted his head. "Merci. And I have the office inventory that the sergeant was so kind as to bring me this morning. Your firm has a shipping client. A tonic containing nux vomica and strychnine in a minute dose. When measured, it is harmless, but when you moisten the inside fold of a piece of paper and dust it down the crease, it becomes lethal. Even more dangerous is smearing a trace down the rim of a matchbox and telling a worried man to take a bit to calm down." Willie's fingers clenched only once on the desk's edge. "You see, monsieur," continued Poirot, almost regretfully, "that your mercy was just bookkeeping. One death balances another. Close the account with one neat piece of paper." For a moment, nothing moved but the blind cord blowing in the breeze. Redphone said pretty low. Arthur Willoughby raised his head. He wasn't wild. He wasn't broken. He was quite exhausted. He said, "You make a nice pattern, Mr. Poirot. Do you never allow for coincidences?" "I allow for it everywhere," remarked Poirot. "Except when everything is exact. You returned to your residence several times to straighten out the mess that the storm had created. You arrived before dawn today to get this letter. You packed a parcel for a colleague in detention and chose the sole remedy whose active principle the autopsy would undoubtedly reveal. Coincidence, mon ami, does not oil a lamp twice or polish a latch that is already clean." Willoughby regarded the letter as if it may burn. "Julia wrote it to save me." "Yes," said Poirot, "and to save you she would have forced you to confront the truth. Instead, you chose the telephone's voice. We went to the police yard together. There was no scene." Willoughby withdrew his watch and carefully placed it on the table. "Dial up." He nodded to the sergeant like one officeman to another, and did not object when the cuffs clicked shut. We sat on the veranda at Myrtle Bank later in the evening. The harbor switched from steel to wine. In the lounge, someone started a phonograph. It sounded really far away. It was never in the voice itself, I admitted at last. Who knew how to use a voice? Poirot's shoes glittered like little arguments. Exact amount. The caller never claimed to be Mr. Clark. It claimed to be a client recommended by him. That is subtler and harsher. It employs a man's presence as a tool. The calm square. Hastings. A reference is a harmless object that no one looks at. He sighed as he reflected on his normal night and his neat hubby. I prefer the murderer who blunders. He's easy to forgive. And the doctor is innocent, if vain. He identified left-handed too quickly because he wanted to appear sophisticated. He talked about steam-topping clocks since it was a theory he liked. He prefers phrases over stories. The palms resumed their calm whispering, as if the island had chosen to forget. Willoughby never intended to murder her, I explained. No, answered Poirot. He intended to keep his universe straight. But no lie is more harmful than the one a clean-cut man tells to preserve his dignity. He observed the water till the ship's lights came on. Hastings, do you remember his phrase at the chessboard? The threat always comes from the peaceful square. He rose, fidgety as ever, and placed his hat with care. This time, the quiet square wasn't on the board. It was located in a man's heart. We entered as the first strains of a dance melody floated over the floor, and the island, which tolerates everything except untidiness, prepared for another typical night. Music, and so ended Poirot and the rain on Orange Street. A story of a quiet voice on the phone, a cautious man, and a storm that refused to stay outside. If you've listened this far, you're the reason Nocturnal Tales exists. Your time, curiosity, and kindness allow these mysteries to find a home week after week. Every listen, remark, and small show of support contributes to the channel's growth and keeps it alive. This episode is dedicated to the people of Jamaica who have suffered tragic losses as a result of Hurricane Melissa. Our thoughts are with everyone who is rebuilding in the aftermath of the storm, including homes, lives, and the sense of serenity that weather can so easily take away. If you would like to help, please consider funding official relief groups. Question for you tonight. Without giving away any clues, what do you observe first when you suspect something is wrong? The silence, the light, or the tiniest thing out of place? Tell us in the comments. Your responses frequently impact the mood and mysteries that unfold next. If you want to go even farther, you may subscribe to our channel for ad-free episodes and early access, or become a member for behind-the-scenes notes, ebooks, and new narrative voting. The description includes all of the details. From everyone here at Nocturnal Tales,